welcome back to the Nullified Take channel on YouTube or wherever you listen to your audio podcasts. We've got Eden Porter in the house, all the way from Australia in Australian Titans versus Rebels. Eden, how you doing?
Oh, I am great, mate. Guys, thank you so much for having me on. This is so awesome. Listen to the podcast a lot. So to get here to have a bit of a chat, it's really fun. And it was such a great season. So it's a good season to talk about as well.
It's, you know what, it never gets easy hearing that from Survivor players that you actually do listen to some of the podcasts, because obviously we're very critical at times, right? And like
Yeah.
we're very opinionated for people who've never played the game. What was it like? I guess you would have probably been a podcast listener prior to playing the game, so you would have had some preparation going into it. But what was it like, having people criticize players' games? Obviously, we go off and edit. Like, what's it like sitting on the other side of it?
Yeah, so it's funny because I'd consume all podcasts, I'm in Reddit, I'm reading everything when there's a normal season Survivor. So when my season went on, I was like, oh, I'll just continue doing what I've usually been doing. And I start to do that. And then it's hard. Like,
I can imagine.
Reddit at the best of times can be very toxic. So when you're jumping in there and there is a lot of stuff, and like you said, it is an edit, there's a version of stuff, there's a bigger story being told, and people do disconnect from that, and they just go, oh, this is this, and this person's rah, rah, rah. And so I had to stop. I had to actually take a step back. And my wife, Rachel, I got her to do a bit of like collating for me. So she would look into stuff and be like, oh yeah, this is the sort of stuff that's happening. Because it was hard just dealing with some of the stuff. And it's funny how much it switches on a dime as well. Like, I remember after episode 1, everyone was like, oh, Invisible Hand, Eden, Mark, these guys rock, this is really cool, rah, rah. And at episode 2, it was suddenly like, oh, this guy's paranoid, he's terrible, he's the worst player ever, get him out of here, this Eden guy wastes space. I was like, wow, how did that happen so quickly?
Yeah.
So
for me, it's been the other way. Like, I've been podcasting now this is going in, like, we've done this channel for 2 years, and I did with a different channel for about half a year as well. And I've interviewed quite a few players from Survivor South Africa, Survivor US, obviously Australian Survivor. And one thing it's done for me as a fan, it's actually given me additional appreciation when we do this. Like, I think I'm the one in the group that always would say, hey, remember, we're seeing like an edited version. There's probably things we don't know about, because I've interviewed a lot of players, like, and you hear all these stories after the season. I feel like it makes you more aware. Was that similar for you in your own experience sort of playing the game now? If you look back at other seasons, do you feel like it gives you an even bigger appreciation? Maybe the edit was at play with making some players look like geniuses and other players you don't come across as geniuses on some of the shows, to be polite.
Yeah, look, honestly, like, looking at other seasons, you do start to wonder how much is missing and how much other play, because we are victims of it ourselves. From watching the show, you go, oh, this person, like, oh, Caroline, she never smiles, she's really mean, oh, we don't like Caroline. And then you meet these people in real life, loveliest person in the world, absolutely amazing. And I'm like, they are literally never showing you smile ever, Caroline. She's like, I know, it's wild. And that's just the perception that goes out there. And so for me, talking to other players was really good as well. So the community of EvX players is so supportive. And a lot of them reached out to me before before it aired and was like, hey, just want to say, if you want to chat about stuff, like let me know. And it was actually really nice and really encouraging. And that was really interesting because they really gave us the heads up of, hey, it's going to be hard. There's going to be things that, and look, some of my moves were attributed to other people. And I've got a good enough understanding of the game and the fact there's a TV show to understand that.
Yes.
I didn't go as far as some other people. And so in terms of storytelling, sometimes it's more beneficial for other things to fall in other directions. And look, at the end of the day, I was a pre-jury boot. So I'm lucky that I did get an okay edit for some of the time that I was there. And I did get some confessionals and stuff, which was really great for someone that left before the jury. And so that I'm lucky in that sense. But yeah, some of the things I did understand that some of the things would go in a different context, or some of the moves would come from a different for an angle. Because at the end of the day, they edit it in reverse. Like, they know who wins and they build the show based on that. So you can sort of understand that. But yeah, it is really tricky sometimes to watch. But I got advice. So as soon as we finished the show, I got advice to write down like your memories of your experience and have them really clear in your head. And then, because when the show airs, it will be it'll be a canon. That'll be the canon version of the show that everyone remembers. So that will be the one that everyone has their head around, and you will actually start to think that that is what happened, and that is your experience. So you needed something to hold on to be like, no, I actually did get along with Winner okay, and me and Mark had this and stuff like that. Because then when you watch the show, you're like, oh, wow, this person really hated this person, or this person said this about them. And it's not always true. So I was really lucky that I did spend a bit of time writing stuff down, and you do have that memory in your head of like, yeah, no, I did this and this and this and this. So that was a really good piece of advice for me as well.
And that obviously helps with podcasts afterwards as well, if you can like recall back to certain things that happened, because podcasts love to dive into the what didn't we see on TV kind of thing as well.
So good. And the deep dives, so I love talking about Survivor anyway. So doing deep dives and going into all that stuff was really fun. Yeah, doing.
I can imagine. I want to say hello to my co-host here tonight as well, Tom. You know, Tom is someone who chose you as his preseason winner pick. I don't know if you know that.
I do.
But
I do.
He was a little bit upset because we've got a still from his audition video last year here, and he feels like you may have taken his spot because you had his hairstyle, you had the mustache, so he's going to have to change it up this season. He can't do the same thing anymore.
Dude, that hair is bang on. That is exactly my hair. And you've even got this happening. You've got, mate, this is good. It's gone now. Is it coming back?
No, well, I needed it for a film, so I didn't have much time to grow it. I mean, I don't know how long you've had that one on your face, but that was like 2 months.
Story about this bad boy, right?
Yeah, go for it.
I grew this to look more interesting in my Survivor interviews. So at the start of lockdown, so 2020, I was like, you know what? I've auditioned for all these years. I'm just going to change my face up a bit. I'm going to grow a mustache, do something different, stand out a bit more. Let's see how this goes. And I grew it, and then I was like, I'm just going to keep it now for these auditions. And I kept it, and then I got married. So all my wedding photos, I've got this mustache now. And so now I'm like, well, I've got to sort of hold on to it. And now I've had a kid, and Phoenix knows me with my mustache. So now it's sort of just become a little bit of me. But it literally started off because I wanted to sort of stand out more in Survivor. I got very deep into the Survivor audition process. Like
That's amazing. Well,
everything,
It gives us like a point of reference. Like if you want to get on the show, this is the level you have to go to. To get on, maybe you should still, double down on this and see if they think you're, Eden's little brother or something. Applying.
Maybe
you could be the what was it? Russell Hans's nephew that went to go play
Brandon.
Brandon, you could be the Brandon to Eden's Russell.
I can have a mental breakdown on Survivor. Yay!
Yeah, you could throw the rice out. You could
throw the rice out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is good stuff.
Who would be my Philip? Like, who's an Australian version of Philip? Maybe Kelly. Kelly would make me go crazy.
Put you out there with Mucky, mate. I reckon half a season with Mucky, you'd go crazy for sure. He'd be the Philip Shepherd of Australian Survivor.
He would be. He'd be the specialist. He'd be coming up with nicknames for everyone. And yeah. Good.
How do you deal with the mustache? Because the thing that killed me was having to continuously keep it off my top lip. That's the worst.
I did some mad trimming before I went on the island, and then it just started getting out there. But it does get annoying. It does really get annoying. But we're only eating rice and beans, so it's not too bad on the old strainer.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
We've got a few people in the live I just want to say hello to as well. We've got Oreo in the live saying hello to all of us. We've got Gabe there saying great to see Eden and Chris, and not Tom. Why are you not? Okay. You don't know this about Gabe, Eden, but Gabe and Tom have a rivalry. So if there was ever a rival season, Gabe would go out there because apparently, Gabe loves Pikachu, but Tom is more of a Charizard fan?
Anything but Pikachu. I'm not basic,
Mate. Squirtle boy over here. The Squirtle squad.
Squirtle.
Watch out, Gabe's going to come for you as well, Eden.
And he's super effective against you, electric beats water.
Yeah, this is true. He's super effective.
We've also got on Twitter, we've got Pice Gaming saying here that Eden, you're great, ignore them, buddy. You made it to the most people can't say that.
You're very
as well.
nice, mate. Yes. Dateable. I'm dateable now. I made the merge. I was happy with that.
Yeah, and Mark is asking you a question. Who's your favorite US player?
Yes, so I absolutely love Jonathan Penner. I thought Jonathan Penner was someone, I love his narration. I love how he can tell a story. And there's a big influence on me going out there because I've also trained in acting and stuff like that. And I see myself as a bit of a storyteller out there. And that I really resonated with. And the original season, Rob C. Rob Sestonino, Amazon. I felt a kinship to him, and someone that studied the game, that came on board, that wanted to play big and do things, and came up with sort of new strategies. And he was someone that I saw a lot of myself in. They're probably my two up there, but I have I'm a day one Survivor fan, and there's so many of the old school guys that I like. I love Lex and like this. Yeah, it goes back to the original Johnny Fairplay. Like blew me away. I remember watching that like as a kid, being like, "This is wild." I absolutely.
And you got to meet him, didn't you, when he came over with George? How was that experience for you?
Look, honestly, this is so crazy. So I posted. So he posted that he was in Melbourne. And we were like, "Oh, we've got to go to this screening." And on the airport, he basically posted a photo of him at the airport being like, Johnny Fairplay's landed in Melbourne. And then, so I basically linked that and I said, "Oh, lock up your grandma's, Johnny Fairplay's in town," right? And he saw that and he just private messaged me and was just like, "Hey, Ian, you're on this season. How you going? Do you want to catch up for a beer?" And I had Johnny Fairplay. Like, this is like me as a 17-year-old losing my mind, being like, Johnny Fairplay is video calling me right now. Like, this is what, and I was like, I told my wife, I said, "I'm sorry, I've got to go have a beer with Johnny Fairplay." So I just went out, and it was, he's such an absolute legend. Like, so much
that's
fun.
Amazing. I was so gutted. So I moved to Melbourne about 7 months ago. So new to Melbourne. And I had Shannon message me when they were all in Melbourne with Johnny Fairplay and George. And she's like, "Hey, are you going to come hang out?" Because I've spoken to Shannon a few times as well. She's also been on the podcast. And I said to her, "I can't, like, this weekend, because I planned it way in advance. I was in the Gold Coast. It was my first time going to Surfers Paradise. So I couldn't. I wasn't even here to be able to go. And I felt like I really just missed out so big. So I think going into next year, don't plan any trips away around the premiere. Any of the 2 or 3 weeks you think that is going to be premiere for Australian Survivor. If I'm not on the season, obviously.
That's exactly right.
That's what I'm still hoping for, to be real. But what an amazing experience. We've got Oreo here. He's kind of interested. Besides the mustache game that you had to grow out and prepare for Survivor, what else did you do when you started going into the process? And I guess when you get past that first casting call, you know that there is a possibility that you're actually going to get on the season. What prep did you do going into the season?
So, give you a bit of context, gentlemen. So I've been applying the whole time, like 8 years. Every single year, I put in my application. I did my video. I did. So over my entire lifetime, even back when it was in America, I was telling this story on another one. I started applying for the green card lottery. Which is to get a green card in America, because to be able to play American Survivor. So I thought that would be really good. I thought Jeff Probst would love that. This guy's like basically getting a citizenship in America just to play Survivor. I was like, this is really cool. And then
you would have been the Banu before Banu.
Yes. Then when it came back in 2016, I was like, I've got to do this. So I started basically applying, and that first year I got all the way through to the very, very end. Did every round. And that's back in the day when it was like, so we had a video. No, so it started off the video and then you put in a written application. Then we did a Skype. It was a Skype. And then we did a phone call. Then we did a group. And the group was really fun because they did a mini episode. So they had a huge group of us and they split us into 2 tribes. And we actually did some challenges, and then we did a mini tribal council, and that was really fun. And I tell you, this is 2016, so not a lot of people knew what was happening, right? And so they did in the group. They said, "Okay, go around and what's some first impressions of some people in the group?" And being Australians, everyone is quite like nice and like, "Oh, this woman looks pretty good," or "This guy would be good at getting us fish," and "This guy looks pretty friendly over here." And it got to me. And I just started eviscerating people around me. I was just like, "This girl next to me is going to break a nail and have a meltdown. I can't have her in my tribe. This old woman looks like she can't hack it mentally out there. She's going to break down." And the producers were just like, "Oh, yeah." And everyone else in the room was like, "Who is this guy?" So I did that and went to the one-on-ones. But this was back in the day when they really wanted like a survive, like what have you survived? They really wanted like a sob story. And I never had that. And so they were drilling down like, "Hey, were your parents divorced or did you have any trauma?" And all this. I'm like, "Not really. I've had quite a good childhood," and all this sort of stuff. And ultimately, if you remember season 1, 2016, do you remember Evan?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he basically was my equivalent. So he ended up getting on. So he was the Melbourne drama teacher, sort of young guy, loved the show and everything like that. And so he ended up getting on, and I lost out. And then for the next 7 years, didn't get past the video round. Didn't get contact or anything like that. So I was keep sending it in. And then all that time, I would be making, like, I've got Survivor puzzles. I've got like I started 3D printing. So this is before it became cool to 3D Survivor puzzles.
Yeah.
And I'd make like, you know, the one where you hold the pole up and you put the ball on top. You know, the one where you hold the ropes and you move the ball up the state. So I had all this stuff, and I would just sandbag throwing. I'd always just chip away at stuff like that. So I always had puzzles and like things that I'd use to train with. And then when it got to this time, man, I was like, this has to be it. This has to be my time. I'd got married. I'd had a kid. We just bought a house. I'd done all this stuff in my life, and I just felt like it had all come together. And so then when I put my application in, that's when I really started to write down like my strategies that I would practically use out there. I came up with 9 pillars to win Survivor. And I really started to drill down on the pillar aspect. I didn't spend a lot of time on the physical preparation. One thing I did a couple of weeks where I practiced like eating less food, and that, but I didn't. This is where it gets a bit funny, because I actually didn't get on this season. I got cut again from Titans versus Rebels. Yeah, so I thought I was on. I was like, this is happening, and then I get the phone call, and they said, look, unfortunately, they just don't think you fit the theme. You just don't fit into the Titan Rebel theme. We love you, but you just don't fit in. And I said, what did I get down to? They said, we take 24 and you're number 28. And I was like, I missed out by 4 spots. This is wild. And so then I went back to my normal life. I was like, okay, I'm done. See you later. Fine. Another dream shattered. I'll try next year. And then 5 weeks later, so everyone else got told yes then, right? They're all prepping and doing stuff over 5 weeks. 5 weeks later, on a Friday night at 7 p.m., I get a phone call saying, hey, someone's dropped out. Are you still keen to go? Can you still go? I'm like, yeah. And they go, okay, we're going to repitch you as like the Titan of pop culture. So we know you love movies and film and all that stuff, so we're going to repitch you as that. Stay by the phone. An hour later, at 8 o'clock at night on Friday, I get a phone call, and it was just, you're going to Samoa. And I like lose my mind. So I'm in tears. Rachel's in tears. Phoenix wakes up. He's in tears. And then I'm like, when do I leave? And he goes, 8 a.m. Monday morning. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I had 48 hours to prepare everything, to go from not being on to be on, to like on a plane. And then I'm in Samoa like that Monday night. It was wild. And so at that point, I couldn't do it. I had all the past times I was like, well, if I know I got on, I've got like 6 weeks or so to really ramp up my prep and start doing stuff. And so I just didn't have that time. But luckily enough, over the past like 8 to 23 years, I had done enough stuff to know my strategies, how to approach it, what to do, and things like that. So that's really what I did. Fire, like practicing fire, is obviously really important. Like that's a big one. You can see Caroline, she had practiced so much fire at and it came in handy. Basically, it got her into the final when she got past Ray. So that was a big one that's really easy to practice. I think going to the gym, starting to put on some more muscle, starting to put on some more weight in preparation is really important as well, because you could see Mark did it. Mark's a perfect example. He bulked up and he just burnt through that fat when he was out there on the island. And that actually gave him a lot of staying power out there. I think that's the best. Some people say, like stop eating to get yourself ready. But then I'm a firm believer in that. If you can at that point, try and put some more weight on. And then the other one is interesting is get off coffee. Get off, if you drink a lot of like sugary drinks, get off them. Like smoking's obviously another one. It's really hard. Like they're the sort of things you got to think about. If you're used to having a couple of red wines every night, like you need to get off that stuff, because there's nothing. Some of the guys had coffee withdrawals out there. They had coffee headaches and things like that. And it's just not, if you're dealing with a game where it's all about relationships and you're in a bad mood because you haven't had your coffee for 4 days, that can really impact your game. So these are the sort of things.
I'm making note of the coffee for sure. Like that is my advice, So like I would have to like cut off the coffee, go decaf.
Sure. Go decaf for a while.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's more the habit, but yeah, I can see how it can give you headaches and things like that. But what a story. I mean, going from being an alternate to such a short period, going out there, playing the game, finding out that you're a Titan. And even when we were looking at you in the Titans tribe, we were like, how does the Titan sort of theme fit, but they do this in every single Survivor season, right? They kind of stretch a little bit with making. But I'm so grateful that we still have themes in Australian Survivor, because I think that it makes seasons memorable. At least, what was it like? You get on the show, you meet your fellow Titans. Did you feel like immediately like, I am fitting into this tribe? Like, were you like sort of trying to find your feet a little bit with the personalities you had?
Honestly, with me coming in so late and having to like switch on, there was a bit of imposter syndrome. Like, I was like, I don't think I'm a Titan. Like I don't see it. And there was a bit of that. And then I had to get to the point where I'm like, no, let's just own it. This is like, they've chosen you for a reason. Like, you've been trying for so long. Like, this is your time to do it. And so I had to sort of shut that part of my brain out. Like, no, you're not an imposter. This is here. You're here for a reason. I automatically started like categorizing people. And obviously I know the archetypes. So I'm already putting people into all the archetypes and everything like that. And
how deep did you go? Did you go like, what they call the winners edit that they do on Reddit?
Edgic.
Did you go edgic level?
There's some, you can go really deep with some of that stuff. But I was differently like, okay, this guy's the mad scientist. This guy's obviously going to be like the jock, and
the leader, or the alpha.
Yeah, all this sort of stuff. So I was breaking everyone down as much as I could. And instantly, like, going into the game, there were two things that I wanted to do. One was, I didn't want to bro down like meat tray. I wanted the season. I wanted to impact the season in a way that we could get to the end with players that knew the game, that understood what it was, and that wanted to play and make big moves. I didn't want to have any goats at the end. I didn't want to have any bro down mateship like alliances at the end. I wanted it so it was going to be, I really wanted to be part of one of the best seasons of Australian Survivor. And I'm like, the way to do that is to get some really strong people in the end game and just have this crazy end game. And that's sort of what I went in there talking. And me and Mark thought the same thing. Mark and me were really on board with that. And we had a few conversations. That was one thing I wanted to do. Another thing I wanted to do was make an alliance or a connection with an older woman out there. Because historically, older women are targeted really early, especially in the tribe portion of the game. And it's not until they make it to merge that then they can sort of go into the background a bit and maneuver, and they usually get quite deep. So I thought they'll be very on board and loyal at the start of the game. So if I could make some connections with that and build an alliance around that, I knew I had these people that's within their best interest to stay with me. Whereas in a meat tray situation, like, those people are gone early, and I could see myself, like, I was honestly, out of all the guys, I was on the weaker end of the guys on the Titans tribe. So I knew if we went down that route, eventually it would get to, we can lose Eden. We can lose Eden as well. And so I needed to establish power straight away. So I made a connection with Caroline. The Caroline was so funny. I remember it was like day 2 and we were out collecting wood, and Caroline just sort of looks over to me, and I'm not sure whether you know this about Caroline, but she has a potty mouth. Like, she looks at me, she goes, when are fucking people going to start talking about fucking alliances, huh? And I was like, wow, I did not expect that from Caro. And I'm like, mate, let's do it. And we were both fans. Caro's a big fan. And we just talked that, and we're like, okay, this is good. And then we made a connection with Kitty, brought Kitty, and then me and Mark connected up. Then Mark had the V's. And that was the big thing about the invisible hand. We didn't want to be seen as the one person pulling everyone together. But if we could pull a few here, and Mark pulled in a few, and we could get basically a majority from that, and no one could point to me or Mark being like, that's the guy that's running this thing. That was the ideal situation. But everyone, it's a game. When you get out there, you get told this again and again. It is a social game. You 100%. Just have to talk, ask questions, form connections. Like, me and Mark, we started talking. He's a diplomat. He may have mentioned it once or twice on the show.
A couple of times.
and I told him,
apparently he was a former diplomat.
Yeah, yes.
I don't know if he's still at that level of being a diplomat. You know, he used to be a diplomat.
So we started talking, and I was telling him a story. I was like, oh, that's funny, you're a diplomat. I used to work with someone at the cinema who went on to become a diplomat, and I was traveling around Argentina, and she saw it on Facebook, and she messaged me and said, hey, do you remember me? We used to work together about 10 years ago. And I said, oh, yeah, Claire. She goes, your taxes pay my accommodation, like my house over here, so you should stay with me. I was like, awesome. So I stayed with her, and I told Mark as like a funny little story. And he's like, was her name Claire? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I'm really good mates with her. And you could not get a more perfect connection.
Yeah.
And from that, me and Mark, it's just a little thing like that we were okay. We're going to work together. We've got a connection here. So it's about finding those connections. Because one thing is, you can ask questions all day long, but if you're not engaging, or if you're not asking the right questions, if you're just there going, okay, are you married? Do you have kids? What do you do for work? Blah, blah, blah. Like, there's that aspect of it. But then when you actually get a conversation, you actually get deeper. That's when people start feeling connections. And that's what builds like alliances straight at the start of the game. So that's what you really got your focus on. That's what I was doing anyway.
I'm just going to bring a comment up really quickly here before we go into the next one. Hello, welcome to the live. Says that I'm a little bit late, but loved Eden. He was my favorite on the season. Best narrator of any season ever. Loved watching from his point of view. So obviously, hello, you missed the beginning of this, but Eden kind of modeled his narrating a little bit on Jonathan Penner. So obviously showing that, that was an aspect of the game you focused on, and definitely fans, they sort of noticed that as well when they were watching the season. You mentioned here you formed that connection with Kitty and with Carolyn, and then Mark obviously had the V's. When did the V's become an issue in your mind with Mark, obviously, because we saw the rift in the beginning moments there, and we could see Caroline, she was like onto it from the start, like according to the edit, but when did you start getting worried where you were like, is I actually his closest person? Are we the middle-aged Mafia his allegiance, or is he a little bit too close to the V's in the game?
So that really good pickup, because there was it is hard to hide genuine alliances out there, because you can say to someone, hey, let's be a secret alliance, but let's not be too close. But then what happens is, because you're not too close, you actually then start distrusting the person, being like, well, we're not talking as much, and you don't get to know them as well. And so it's really hard to have a secret sort of alliance, whereas everything else is plain as day. Like Mark and the V's, they would sleep next to each other every single night. And we just very quickly were like, okay, these guys are locked in together. And they didn't try and hide it at that point. They were just together. And me and Mark, I knew me and Mark were tight. Me and Mark made a commitment to each other right at the start. We said, we will never vote each other out. We didn't say anything about not voting out people around us, but me and him would basically not shoot at each other, but we'd shoot at other people. Maybe there'd be some collateral damage during this journey. I knew I could still rely on Mark, and I knew I had Caroline and Kitty. What ended up happening was there was a conversation where Viola did go, this is like after the Jess vote, and we were sort of trying to figure out where the voting was going to go next. And Viola did have a conversation with Nathan about her going in with some of the strength people and targeting a Caroline, right? And Nathan actually had an okay relationship with Caroline. And I actually had an okay relationship with Nathan as well. And Nathan told both of us that, oh, Viola's actually thrown your name out there. And Viola then sort of backtracked it and was saying along the lines of, oh, I was testing Nathan to see whether he would bite, and I didn't actually mean that. And that didn't, there was definitely alarm bells there. So we were like, we're not 100% sold on that. And talking to Mark afterwards, there was an aspect of, it's like half measures. You got to go full measures. If you're going to take a shot at someone, you have to make sure you hit them. Because if you test the water and be like, hey, I wonder if people don't like this people, and that gets back to people, you're in a lot of trouble. And that's sort of where it started. Me and Mark had one really good conversation where we were trying to ascertain whether we would turn on our respective groups. And it was very much like a Mafia Don family coming together, because we didn't want to say it out loud. We didn't want to say, Mark, are you going to vote out the V's? And he didn't want to say, are you going to turn on them? But we were like, so if it came to it, do you think there'd be an opportunity to maybe lessen the number of people around us? And we were like, oh, that would be interesting. And that, because neither of us wanted to say it out loud. And I did say to him at one point, I said, are you running the V's? Are you like basically saying, this is the strategy, this is what we're doing? And he was like, no, I'm just mates with them. I'm mates with them. Ultimately, he was the strategy behind like a lot of their maneuvers and stuff. But you didn't want to sort of say that out loud. And again, in case it gets back to those people, the worst thing that could happen is you go back to Viola and be like, oh, Mark's walking around saying that he's running you guys and he's bossing and because that's when cracks can form. So we knew that there was something there. And then when it came to the Viola vote, it was something that like if you study the game, a big part of the game is timing, right? And it is knowing when to strike. And such a good example of this is actually last season, where you see Shonny and Liz talking about eventually turning on George and going, yeah. we'll eventually turn on George. And then George getting to them early. And so I went into this game. One of my pillars of success was, if you're going to turn on someone, go after them, the tribal council, before it's logical to go after them. And I sort of put that into practice with the swap. So we did the swap, and I sort of mentioned to Kitty, I said, Kitty, you know what a logical player would do now? A logical player would establish power by voting off one of the rebels. And then after that, they would then vote off a Titan that they wanted to get rid of, because you've established power, the rebels are in the minority, and then you can turn on one of your Titans. So a logical player would do that. So if we want to avoid that happening, then I think it could be an interesting idea if we thought about voting off someone now. And she was like, oh, really? Oh, my God. Oh, I don't know. Wow, that's cool. I didn't ever thought about that. And I was like, oh, yeah, Kitty, you take that, you run with it. So then I planted the seed. And that was another thing that I wanted to do. I didn't want to be the person coming out there going, hey, this is what we have to do. And eventually I did have to do that later on in the game. But at this point in the game, I was like, I'm fine planting seeds and people letting those seeds. I had this my final tribal council speech. It was all about planting seeds in my very own Garden of Eden to manipulate people.
Nice.
And so Kitty then went off to Caroline, and she talked to Caroline about it. And Caroline was just like, I'm on board. I'm already suspicious. Yep, let's do it. Rah. So then they came back to me and they were like, guys, Eden, we've got to do this. This is a great thing. We're going to do this move. And so at that point, this is perfect for me, because now they are feeling ownership of this move. They're going out, they're recruiting Riri, they're recruiting Sarah, they're doing all of this stuff. And I'm not going to get hit with any of the collateral damage and you saw what happened. It was all about getting revenge on Caroline and Kitty. And I ended up basically maintaining my strength, weakening Mark a little bit, because I wanted to work with Mark and I didn't want him to have other allies out there. So I wanted him to be able to work with it, because there was definitely a situation where Mark was really close with Winner, with Val, with Valeria. Like, he was getting a lot of momentum, which is great. But ultimately, I wanted to still have that really strong relationship with him. So at that point, all the collateral damage comes back on those two, and me and Mark still managed to maintain our relationship. So that was a really interesting scenario how it went down.
Yeah, very interesting. And for me, the edit was interesting because it kind of showed you as being reluctant to make the move. You were kind of like, hey, I don't know if it's the right time to make the move right now. They were really honing in on your nervous energy, which they did earlier in the season as well. So it made me feel like you were less on board with the plan, and that, Caroline and Kitty was sort of running the vote there, but clearly there was a lot more happening behind the scenes, like you said, with the subtle game that you were playing.
Yeah, I think what ends up happening is sometimes you do things too well. Like if you're too subtle, or if you're too behind the lines, then again, this is getting pretty in the weeds, but then you start looking at the edit and maybe it's like, it's too confusing, or there's too many layers to it. And it's just like, what's easier? The revenge, that this person hates this person goes out there and gets it. So sometimes I was a bit too tricky for my own good, and it ended up biting me in the butt at points, but not taking anything away from the girls. Like, it was a great move for all of us, but it is funny how things get positioned in the world. And that second Jess vote, again, they turned my paranoia up to like 11, and it's pretty easy to do that when you're out there. But again, I think that was more to do with the fact that they wanted to make the episode a bit more interesting, because
they're really good at what they do, right? Like, the producers
so good,
know how to like hook us, even at the expense of some of the players that are playing. We've got Gabe actually talking about that vote here. He's asking Eden, at the Jess vote, why stack so many votes on Nathan? Wouldn't one vote on Nathan be enough to protect against the idol?
Gabe, it's good question, mate. So basically, we weren't 100% sure that we had Jaden and Nathan. So then it became Jaden, Nathan, and Jess, which is potentially 3 votes. So I felt we needed at least 3 votes, because I wasn't 100% on those guys. Jess, I know she's thrown out there. Nathan, I thought he was feeling like on the out, so he could just go in with that. Winner, I felt okay with, because Mark had a good connection with him. And so what ended up happening was, Winner was not meant to vote for Nathan. Winner at Tribal Council was just like, oh, wow. Viola was massively attacking Nathan at Tribal Council. It was blowing up. And Winner called an audible. He was like, "Oh, I think things are changing. I think everyone's jumping on the Nathan bandwagon." So he put another vote on Nathan. So it ended up being 4 on Nathan, which honestly, it could have blown up a lot of the plans and things could have really happened. But like ultimately, and that's a really good pickup and a really good question. So we didn't actually want that many in there, but I wasn't sold on Nathan, Jaden, and Jess at that point. So that's why we needed 3. And then the winner one was just out of the blue. And you know what was funny was after that, Nathan was like, "Who voted for me?" Like he wanted to really know who voted for him. And I sort of said to him, I said, "Who do you think voted for you?" And he goes, "I reckon it was the V's and Mark and Charles and all these sort of people." And I was like, "Yeah, I think it was as well, mate. I definitely think it was." And then that started a cycle of distrust between Nathan and the V's and Charles. And so, again, I managed to get myself in this middle sort of position. And it was funny because Nathan kept going up to Charles and saying to him, "Mate, I know you voted for me. Just admit it. It's fine. I don't care, but just admit it." And Charles was like, "Dude, I actually didn't. I'm being honest." Nathan was like, "Look, I know you did." And they got more and more heat. And Charles started to genuinely get really pissed off. He was like, "Dude, I didn't do it. I didn't vote with you. And now I wish I had because you're really annoying me." And stuff. Like, it's really good. It's really good. Yeah, I love Charles.
Every now and again, I'm checking Instagram Live. Sadly, Instagram does not allow for comments to come up in our feed like it would for anything else. But we had Steffi on the brink, who is one of the South African Survivor players. Steffi played 2 seasons, and she said, "Wow, what commitment to the amount of times that you applied to get onto the show." So very impressed by that. I'm kind of curious, obviously you do go into the swap situation, and like Gabe said, he was kind of worried that, having so many votes against them, that would like sort of put Nathan and Jaden at the bottom of the hierarchy and let them know that they're on the outs with the votes. But you obviously explained why so many votes ended up going on to Nathan in that instance. But you do end up in a tribe with Jaden when it gets to the swap, and he's someone that's very interesting, a bit of, like, out there having fun. It was clearly a part of his strategy as well, according to the edit in any case. But he does become like an integral part of the middle-aged mafia and being able to move in that new tribe. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship that you had with Jaden and how he sort of fitted into your plan, I guess, when you got to that swap tribe?
Yeah, so Jaden was a really interesting person. Like, he'd never seen the game before, never had been any exposure to it at all. He was someone that does his Instagram, does his TikTok and everything like that, and was like, "Hey, do you want to go on a TV show?" "Yeah, great." So he came in there pretty fresh. And it was very evident to me, like, playing the game, if you can figure out people's motivations, you can predict how they're going to react in the game, right? So if you can align yourself with people's motivations, they're more incentivized to work with you and not to betray you. So talking to Jaden, and after that, how we got swapped, I knew his motivation was get back to winner. So I said to him straight up, I said, "Mate, let's work together. Let's vote the same way, and I'll help us get back so you can hang out with winner again." And he's like, "Great." And I feel like that was the building blocks of our relationship. And he was like, "You know what? Just tell me who to vote for. If this gets us through, just tell me who to vote for, and I'll do it." And look, I know it came across at time. I know in some of the edit it came across of like, Jaden felt that he's like, "Oh, they just told me a name and they just didn't want to like do that." Look, I'm a smart enough Survivor player to know when I'm patronizing people and when you don't just, "Hey, mate, we're doing this now. We're doing this." I spent so long, "Hey, so who do you want to work with? Like, who's some of your targets? What's your ideal situation? Or who do you eventually want to be in the final 5 with? And who do you feel comfortable working with?" I tried really, really hard because I know that's what you do. You don't dictate votes. You get people to come up with names and you work with that. And then you make them say the person that you want them to say. But Jaden was an interesting one. Like, he's unlike other Survivor players where he was just like, "No, mate, just whatever you want to do. Just tell me what you want to do. Tell me what I'm doing." And I'm like, "Okay." And it wasn't until, and this is interesting, it wasn't until he lost winner that then that motivation to get back to winner wasn't there anymore, and winner wasn't there anymore. And it's at that point that then he started to be like, "Well, I'll just do whatever." And then it was harder to predict. Like, ultimately, I didn't see him turning on us at that point. And realistically, he did vote with us that first round. So it wasn't like there was this big plan there to like supersede things or something like that. It was literally, he was voting with us. If Ray's votes had gone like differently, Ray would have been gone home, and then we would have just moved on together as a group. Yeah. But he saw an opportunity there to change that. But that first vote with Viola, bringing Jaden in, because the girls weren't sure about bringing Jaden in. And I knew if we didn't bring Jaden in to that first vote, there was a possibility that the 3 rebels, which included Alex, could get in his ear. Mark's annoyed with us. Jaden wants to work with Alex. Mark's suddenly over there. And then me, Kitty, and Caroline are in a minority. Yeah, which would very easily happen. So I knew I've got to at least build something with Jaden, keep Jaden strong with us, and incentivize Mark to want to get rid of a rebel after that. And that was my thinking with bringing Jaden in and trying to solidify that, because Alex is another bro down guy, and there's a big possibility that those guys could start getting along. Then Mark is annoyed with us for getting rid of Viola. So I thought, look, let's bring him in now, make him feel part of this group, and then we'll hold that power moving forward. Yeah,
it's interesting because once again, it just shows the element of randomness that comes with certain players playing Survivor, where you can't predict them. They're not chess pieces that you can easily move. And I'm glad you sort of made it clear in regards to the amount of work that you had to put in to get them on votes, because when we had the podcast, my co-host Kahuna actually said, I don't get why no one wants to work with this guy. And I'm like, well, if you're in an alliance, you need that person to bring something to the table. They also need to add value to be in the inner onion of the alliance, right? It's just one of those things. So if they're not bringing it, and I think it's kind of what you were alluding to, it's very hard to predict or plan for the end game with them, because like you said, outside of the winner motivation, what other motivation did he really have there? We've got a couple of fun comments being made on Jaden. We've got Brendan from Australian Memes, welcome in the live, saying Lord Jaden has never seen the game before. I'm bamboozled.
Very good
by that. And then Mucky is in the live as well, saying, being a Star Wars fan, did you know that having Jaden as your apprentice, most Sith apprentices go after their master?
Of course, mate. It's the rule of 2. Of course I know the rule of 2. And it was definitely a possibility there. But there is... mate, Gabe, dude, tell me about it. Like, Gabe says Jaden tonight is Australian rock draw. Honestly, again, this is, again, something that came up. A lot of those guys didn't know what a rock draw was. Like, Ferris didn't know what a rock draw was. Reed didn't know what a rock draw was.
Wow.
Like, Jaden wasn't sure about it. So it's really hard to predict people's moves, because in my world, like the vote that I went out, and we might get to this later, but I'll jump into it now. So the vote that I went out, I was thinking, okay, if this goes pear-shaped, logically, the thing for those guys to do would be to put votes on Caroline, because then Mark, Jaden, and Valeria, they all flip on Caroline instantly. There's no way those guys are going to rocks for Caroline. Like Mark and Valeria are not going to rocks for Caroline. They're just not, after all that stuff. So I thought they'll put votes on Caroline. We'll probably flip to Caroline, and then we'll move forward in the game. The fact that the votes went on me, the one person that had the relationships with nearly everyone there, that wanted to Mark, Valeria, Kitty, and Caroline all were willing to go to rocks for me at that point. Like they knew exactly what going to rocks were, and they're like, yep, we're going to put our games on the line for this. And then there were other people that maybe didn't quite understand that and were just like, oh, we'll vote, and then we'll swap our votes. I'm like, no. The second vote is when you swap your vote. You then have to have a unanimous decision after that. And Ferris was never turning on Ray. So once you get to that point, Ferris was never turning on Ray and Kitty was never turning on me. So we were going to rocks at that point if that second vote didn't swap. And that would have been wild. And I was so excited about going to rocks. Like, honestly, the first time in Australia, I was like, this is happening. This is happening. Oh my God, we're going to go to rocks. And the best thing about it is me and Ray are then safe at that point. So me, Ray, Ree, and Jaden are all safe, which is crazy. And that was the other thing, that Jaden was actually safe in the rock draw because he had immunity. So again, doesn't quite make sense that you wouldn't want to just do something crazy. But ultimately, I think he ended up thinking that I was more on board, like more pushing the winner vote out than I was, because that was actually Ferris and Ray that really wanted winner out. I was actually trying to get Valeria out at that point. And they were like, no, it's got to be winner. It's got to be winner. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And then, however, Jaden never took that, but he was like, well, you voted for winner, so I'll like target you now. So yeah, it ended up being crazy.
Well, what you should have done is like before, because obviously half the cast don't know what a rock draw is. You should have like whipped out the chalkboard and be like, "Now, kids, if it goes into a tie again, we all draw a rock, and one person's gonna get the magical white rock, and then they go home and they can't win the money anymore." Okay, okay,
So
Jaden.
it was like honestly, it was a good Ferris from Ferris' perspective. It was actually the right person to target, like in terms of the move that they did. They were like, well, Eden is holding these guys together, and he's a key part here. But I just think from a game bot perspective, it was not the right person because that was the one person that could have probably gone to rocks for because no one was thinking, no one could see Jaden's move coming. But like it helped them out at the end because it really fractured a lot of those groups. And then we started from that point on, we really started this this voting blocks aspect of there was no really big group. It was, okay, these guys are together, these couple are together, these couple are together. And then it was just all about combinations of which groups, which made for a very, very fascinating rest of the merge there because everyone could just jump on. Yeah. And if you notice, no one actually because of this, very few people had to actually like cut their ride or die or their really close allies just because the nature of, okay, well, now we'll all move over here and we'll all vote off Valeria or we'll all vote off of Riri. So Kirby didn't have to vote off Riri. Like Ferris never had to cut Ray. Like Mark never cut a V. Kitty never and Caroline never cut each other. Like it was really strange because when in most seasons, it gets to the point where you have to blindside one of your closest like allies, and that didn't really happen in our season. There wasn't much of that at all, which I found again as a fan something quite fascinating.
Yeah, it was very interesting to watch. I do have a question about the middle-aged Mafia because we do end up seeing 3 of them get into the final 6. How surprised were you when you saw that? Because it was also the 3 that you probably wouldn't have guessed would stick together to some degree, getting into the final 6. Like, was that surprising when you watched the season play out?
Like it was like honestly, I knew they were all good savvy players for different reasons. I knew Mark was super pragmatic and super like he had the ability to be, and this is again another thing in the game. You never fully burn a bridge. You always need to go, you know what? We vote against each other, but let's make up and again, if our motivations align, let's vote together this time. So I knew he could do that.
You may not sleep next to them, if they've betrayed you, but you need to work with them until the end in any case.
Exactly. But Caro, to her credit, Caro came to the same. She knew, like, yeah, look, I've got to vote with people that I don't fully trust, but we've got to try and find ourselves. And Kitty, in a way, look, Kitty was interesting. Kitty again didn't know the game, never seen it before in her life, and did rely on us sort of chatting and being like, hey, we should do this and that. So I knew Kitty was strong enough that she could win some challenges and get through a few. I knew Caroline, once she got to the merge with Alex, Ree, like a couple of these other big, strong players, Jaden, Caroline could be quite hidden in terms of the challenge beast threat. So I knew she could get quite far. Mark, I knew was smart enough that he could build relationships and duck and dive. So they all had the ability to get further than I thought. Not than I thought, sorry, that I knew that they could get quite far in the game. And they all had they could all understand the game. Or at least with Kitty, had someone with them that could help her sort of, okay, this is what we're going to do next. So I wasn't actually surprised that they went deep. I was surprised that I wasn't still with them to go deep.
Yeah. But I mean, I can imagine that would be devastating. Like you're missing out one spot to the jury. You could have been the mayor of the jury villa. But I guess we messaged each other as well, like when it happened. And I think I said to you, like, just know that you were out there. You played the game when so many people would love to play. That. Like, I mean, and I really mean that sincerely. Like, I mean, we obviously all of us would love to make the jury or even win the game, but reality is that only X amount of people can, but there's only a select few people who actually even get, chosen in the beginning to go play this game, which is incredible in itself. But now you're on the radar. I do think you're a character that is unique. You're someone that, when they do a returnee season, I would be shocked if you're not at least in the conversation, just based on the work that you did when it comes to the narration, the work with the middle-aged Mafia. I think that in itself, like you had a story arc, and I feel like it's incomplete. So for me personally, I would love to see you on a second chance season to go out there and play again. is there like any themes that sort of stands out for you where you're like, I know you'd probably play any, but like if you could choose, if you had the ability to choose like Second Chance or any other type of season, what would you like to do?
I'd love a second chance season. Let's not look at like 3-time players or 2-time players. Let's look at everyone that's had a go. I'd love that format of second chance. I thought that would be really, really fun. A couple of the other ones I actually really like a millennials versus Gen X sort of situation. I think would be quite fun as well. I would obviously fall into the older category, but I'm sort of young at heart, and I think that would play into some strengths in that sort of situation. Whereas I can get on with both age groups, and would be seen as a bit of an asset in the older.
You'd be like
tribe.
the king of the season.
Yeah. Oh, mate, so good. Oh, I love it. And then there's other fun. Like we were joking about if we ever did a Ghost Island season in Australia, Nathan's jacket could come back as an idol that you could wear.
100%.
So fun stuff like that. But yeah, it was such an experience out there. And you know what? I really tried to focus, because when you're watching it, you see everything you missed out on, and the FOMO is there's Simotion, there's like the domino effect challenge that I'm like, oh man, I love these challenges and I would love to be part of this and part of the end game and all that stuff. But I found that the thing for me was really focus on what you did get to do. Focus on those 31 days of that great experience. Be thankful in the fact that you didn't get voted off 4th, because there were people. Frankie had 2 days on the island and she went home. Like, that was a real possibility. And so be thankful for what you got to experience out there. And remember those like great moments, and like chatting with JLP and having some banter with him and all this sort of really fun stuff, because that's the stuff you come away with. Try not to dwell too much on, I didn't make this and didn't get to jury and I didn't get to do this. Rah, rah. So look, I do feel that there is a part of my Survivor story that hasn't quite been completed yet. Like, didn't get to find an idol, didn't get to win individual immunity, didn't get to the jury. So there's definitely some bucket list items that I'd still like to have a crack at.
Yeah, well, hopefully we do get to see you out there on Fans versus Favorites with myself, Eden.
Oh yes,
all the fans of this podcast know that I've said so many times. Like, I bet you, I've made peace with it. The one time, like, Fans versus Favorites is my least favorite theme, but if I had to go play, that'll probably be the theme that they would end up putting me on, being a podcaster. I mean, does it get any bigger than podcasting about your favorite show all the time? I don't know if it does.
Well, then you look at like some of the Fans versus Favorite seasons though. Some of those the term fan was very loose in terms of some of those people that came on. So it would be cool to actually have a season of fans, like actually legit fans. But yeah, I feel like, look, Heroes versus Villains.
Jaden can't wait. I feel like Jaden can't wait to put us armchair critics in our place if he was ever to get to play the game as a favorite.
Oh god! But if you look at some like last season with Heroes versus Villains, the newbies, it was lambs to the slaughter, really. Like,
I agree. Yeah, for me, Heroes versus Villains is not as high as some other like a lot of fans is like best season ever. I'm like, yes, if you like to see a steamroll, definitely. But I like a competitive season, which your season was competitive. In my mind, your season was better than Heroes versus Villains. And my favorite season, 2017 is up there, definitely. But I also I've got a special place in my heart for Champions versus Contenders too. I've always loved that season. I'm a big PR fan. I've gotten to speak to PR on a podcast before as well. So, for me, that was just a great season. And obviously we had Luke Toki, David Goodnard, so many big characters that season as well, but I agree with you. I don't like the steamroll seasons at all. And, maybe it makes it harder for someone like you to play the game when the level of competition is so much higher. We spoke about this a little bit before we went live, but it'll be interesting to get your feedback on it. If you look at, you mentioned you nearly went to go play the first season, which maybe you would have been ahead of the game back then, and you would have been seen as the Nick Adanzia snake of the season. Most likely you would have been, but I feel like it gets harder every season when players become more and more savvy. Even if they're kind of casual fans, they kind of know a little bit of game strategy. So it must be way harder now to play the game with a competition that is out there that is just at a different level compared to, I think, season 1.
100%. Like season 1, there's people playing, like Lee getting to the Final Tribal Council, never seen Final Tribal Council before, had no idea what it was, had no idea how to pitch his story. And so that's huge. Like, you can steamroll people back then. I think the interesting thing about Australian Survivor is it's like it's American Survivor's journey, but on steroids. Like, over 10 seasons of ours, you can see the strategic developments of the game. Yes, that first season was very rough. There was only a couple of fans on it. Everyone was like, "Well, what happens?" And the voting's sort of all over the place. But then you see it catch up. You're like, okay, it's all about mateship and the strengths sit together, and that sort of falls away. And then it's about no, really strong alliances, or then the underdog alliances come back, or then and then it's about. And now we're at to a point now, which is actually, I feel like Australian Survivor is sort of caught up with some really interesting gameplay. Like, we are deep into the shields strategy now. Like, keep big players around, the lions and hyenas. The idea is, you're a big player. I need other big players around, so we're not the only target. As soon as Kirby goes, Ferris is next. Like, it's like, this is the mentality that we've got to, which is the type of game I wanted to play. I didn't want to be in the one where, like, if you look 5 seasons ago, anyone that made a move, they were the next target. Oh, guys, this is what we're doing. We're voting someone out. Cool. You vote him out. Move went great. They blindsided someone. Next time, oh, he's making all the moves. Get him out. That, to me, is a very uninteresting season. Whereas now we're at this point now where big players are keeping big players around, and lots of blindsides, lots of people realizing they're on the bottom. I'm not sure. Shannon did a podcast with David Foster, DF, the executive producer. I'm not sure if you've listened to it yet. I would highly recommend it. It is really, really interesting. And he talks about basically not throwing people to the wolves. And when he casts people, he gives them a pep talk of like, this is how you should play. Go watch these episodes. Like, this is how you should prep. Like, absorb this. This is the tactics that you should sort of think about when you go in, because he wants everyone to have some sort of understanding. And then when you hit the beach, at least you've given them the tools. Look, people won't use these tools all the time, but at least they've got them, and they've got the ability to be like, you know what I should do now? I've got to manage my threat level because I've done this and this, and the people are looking at me as the threat. Or, hey, I think I'm at the bottom of this alliance. Maybe I should flip to someone else because I'm just going to get like, that's actually fun when people start thinking about that sort of stuff. So that's a really interesting point. And I think it's only shows how quickly Australian Survivor has had to catch up to some interesting tactics. And now it's a great time to be on the show, I think.
I think that Australian Survivor, like a season or two ago, I was still critical of it based on its edit, and I would say it's lopsided. It's too easy to know Mark is going to win. It's too easy to know George is steamrolling until the end. But they really did a good job, and they gave everybody a little bit of screen time this season. Obviously, there was still some main characters that had a little bit more screen time than others, but I do think that they're starting to get that balance right. And then, like you said, the amount of strategy and the interesting, like every single tribal council this season was good. Like, we were interested in every single outcome of every single tribal council. We can't say this about Survivor US currently. And, I really hope that Australian Survivor doesn't follow down that direction with just throwing too much onto the game to the point where it's almost breaking it and not allowing players just to play the game. But, I'm really interested in your own thoughts because obviously you're a fan. You're similar to myself. I'm assuming you've watched it since season 1, even for the US as well. What's your thoughts on, the 26 days of it all, the current sort of twists that are being thrown into it? Like, and I know obviously you're a player and there's a certain level of respect that comes with that for the franchise, but where does this sit with you? Like, if you were chosen to play the game again, would you rather play the current Survivor US, or would you rather go back and play a second season of Australian Survivor at this point?
Honestly, as a fan, and I know we're in the same boat here, Chris, but the classic Survivor of like up until season 40, that's the Survivor for me. That encapsulates the game. That's what it's all about. I do feel the new era is something different over there. One thing that Australian Survivor is doing at the moment, which it is really trusting the cast, it is going, you know what? We've cast these people for a reason. Let's just let them play and let them expand and let them come up with their own. Like, we don't have to throw a million twists at them. I really like this season.
To the point where you can even break the box like Mark did and get an idol. Like, I mean, that would never fly in Survivor US.
No, never. And so the other thing is, like, we didn't have a non-elimination after merge, which I thought, look, honestly, I would have loved one in that 3rd episode after merge. Would have been great for me. But ultimately, I think for the game, get those non-eliminations out of the way. Get some more time to see some more people early on, get some more stories, and then let the game play out as normal. Because looking back at Australian Survivor, some of those non-elimination things, like the vases, remember 100%. The vases? Like, yes. Like, what are we doing, guys? Like, no. Like, no. So
I love the clever twists that they're doing now with, sending Chaos Kelly over to your tribe to come and sabotage.
Stuff like that's fine. And look, ultimately, like in a perfect world, we wouldn't have any non-eliminations because I do feel like they changed the game. Like for me, Alex's non-elimination really hurt my game because me and him had a quite good relationship, and we were tossing up. Like me and Jaden didn't really want to get rid of him, and we were tossing up whether the girls really did because they wanted to keep and it was really difficult. Ultimately, he didn't get voted out, and he went to the other tribe. But Kitty talked to him later and basically told him, "Oh yeah, you were dead in the water, mate. You were gone," which is Kitty's honest to a fault. And so Alex then gets personally quite upset with me going, "Mate, I thought we would have looked out for each other." And I was like, "Well, no, we still wanted to, I was still trying to think of ways to save you and everything like that." But to him, that just sounds like me bullshitting and trying to get out of it. And so that really hurt our relationship. And that comes back to if someone,
and now you have to deal with the fallout. You have to deal with
exactly. So if that doesn't happen, if that doesn't happen, things can happen like that. Oh look, I don't want this person to go, but ultimately I'll stick with my alliance, and they've gone. And it doesn't really hurt me. But when they don't go home and then it gets out and things like that, that's when it can hurt, and that sort of impacts my game. So I don't love that. American Survivor, the new era. Look, there are definitely some. I like it how they've moved to 90-minute, some like longer episodes. I think that's actually fun. You get to know people a bit more.
Yeah, you get to see people practice jumping, for instance. Like. It's a great time.
Exactly. Yeah, all this. So I thought that was good. But look, that's the getting to know the characters and connecting with the characters, and feeling and getting to know the reasons behind people's decisions, I think is really important. And it's not just about the twists, not just about, oh, now you don't have a vote and now this. So I do long for like original Survivor days, but they've made decisions. And look, it comes back to the thing. Maybe they can't do longer seasons because it costs too much money. And if it costs too much money, CBS is just going to cancel it. And then you have no Survivor. So is this version of Survivor better than no Survivor? Yeah, probably. So you've got to take that sort of stuff into account as well. Look,
it's tough, and I don't want to put you on the spot when it comes to it fully. For me, sometimes I wonder, like, what is it that they're spending all their budget on? Because we know that they've got such a, like, if you look at Australian Survivor and what they can put out there at a fraction of the budget that Survivor US has got, then I feel like we're just giving Survivor US an easy pass by saying, oh, we'll budget this and that. Maybe Jeff is a big paycheck. Obviously, he's been there for 46 seasons. And like anything else, like I love, listen, Jeff is the first host ever as a host. He's great. I don't know creatively if he's gone in the direction that I would have necessarily gone in, but again, Survivor and Australian Survivor wouldn't have existed if he wasn't the pioneer of the franchise, really. So 100%. There's some respect that comes for that.
Did you hear the original idea for 41? How?
I did. It was hilarious. Like with Rick Devens being out there, I thought it was funny. Like, and then apparently it wasn't fun in his mind, and that's why he changed it.
Yeah, well, apparently he had conversations with like Mike White and stuff, and they were like, "Is it fun? Is this trading post and tokens and all this stuff fun?" And they're like, "Oh, maybe not. Let's just throw some random challenges at it." So, like, I don't know. Maybe it would have been fun, but they felt the show needed to evolve to have legs still, and so it is something. I do see it as something different. Like it is a different type of show. You have to play the game differently now. Hey, look, it's our old friend Aline. Hey,
got Aline in the chat here. Hello, Aline.
Mate, love it. So I am struggling. And the other thing is, can you really identify between 41 and 46 the seasons and the players? Like I could tell you every person, I was like, oh, this season up until 40, I knew I would struggle with these new. There's some great casting. There are some awesome people, but I would struggle. The only other thing that I think that we're doing as well that American Survivor has sort of fallen off the wagon in, they're all in on the super fan, right? They're all in on the fans. Everyone that's on the show now is on the fans. I love that we're doing more fan casting in Australian Survivor. I think it's fantastic, but you need that balance of recruits and fans. You got to have look, I got burnt by Jaden. That's part of it, but I think it's better to have some people like that, and I think it does lead to interesting maneuvers and things like that in the game. When you have a whole bunch of people that are all game bots and they're all just doing the logical move in this moment to get them through one more round, it stifles innovation and it stifles gameplay. And everyone is just like, okay, now we all do this. Does everyone get that? Yep, that's all good. Okay, that person goes home. And I think you need people that are, no, in my heart, I don't want to vote this person off because like they remind me of my daughter, so I'm going to keep them here. But no, that doesn't work. I think that makes for a more interesting season. And I think right now we are nailing that in the casting. Like the casting department for us is nailing that mix of super fan. Like you've got Eileen, you've got me, you've got Mark, you've got Ray, you've got these people, you've got Caroline, big fans. You go back to, I was talking to Nick about like season 1. He's like, there was probably 3 of us that would be counted as a fan. Whereas our season, probably half the cast, like maybe not super fans, but half the cast were definitely like Charles. Like he's like, yeah, I really like Survivor. I've watched it like heaps and stuff like that. But he wouldn't cast himself as like a super fan. But there are all these people that were like, no, we're fans of the show. Yeah, for sure.
I'm kind of interested, like, and I do want to bring up Kahuna's comment here saying Eden is a brilliant podcast to take my spot for all the US recaps that we do on the Nullified Take channel because he podcasts with me. I was also going to say it feels like you've listened to us because everything that you've just said is pretty much what we've already also like. It's like we're in tune. Like we agree with all of that. Too many super fans, even though we know that it probably cuts into some of our spots. If we were to go and play there, the balance needs to be right for the game to be interesting and for there to be a certain level of unpredictability in the show as well. And I was going to say, like as a fan playing the game, how much of a target do you think in the current Australian Survivor climate does it put on your back if you go out there and you admit to being a fan? Because at one point, people were kind of hiding it a little bit where they're like, oh, I don't want to be seen as the fan because people are going to think I know more than what I actually do.
Yeah, I think originally when there's only 1 or 2 fans on the show and you're like, I'm the super fan, I know everything about Survivor, and you've got the majority of everyone else going, well, let's get rid of that person. They know too much. Let's all us figure it out by themselves. I think it was a big target on people's backs. I think nowadays with more of us, and I'm sure Eileen probably felt the same way. Like you've got some more people that are fans, and as a result, you've got more people backing you up. You've got more people to hide in amongst as the fans. So it's no longer just one person. The other thing, like I didn't want to come out there and be like, I'm the biggest fan ever. I knew I couldn't hide it because I'm too much of a fan, and I would be like, oh my God, this is so cool. I just didn't want to be like, oh, I'm the biggest fan of all time. And I remember the first Matt chat that we had, we got out there, we met JLP. And he points to me and he goes, look at this guy here. This guy here has not stopped smiling the entire time. He must be one of the biggest fans we've ever had on. Isn't that right, Eden? It's like, thanks for blowing up my spot, JLP. And so from that point forward, I just had to own it on Titan Beach. And so I just fully embraced it. And people responded quite well. People were like, oh, Eden, man. And they would just ask me questions. Hey, when does merge usually happen? Hey, what happened in this? Hey, have we ever gone to Rocks before? Hey, has this ever happened? I'm like, oh, this has happened. Blah, blah, blah. And there was sort of fun story time when I would say, oh, the episode 7 on this was really good. And that was actually quite good. I actually think the back end of the game could be when it becomes like just after that merge period. That's when that can become a target. And you're like, okay, you've got your team through this first stage. Now it's a one-on-one game. It could be very easy for people to feel threatened by, oh yeah, Eden's got a really good grasp on this game and it's going to like come back to bite us if we leave him in for too long. And that can definitely happen when the numbers get down to it. It could be a reason for getting rid of people. But again, having a lot of fans there really helps like you be able to hide and maneuver in that regard.
I know that Tom, being a very big fan himself, has always said, like, if he was out to go out and play this game, he would be targeting the young, athletic females early on because they just beast out the end game. Was that something that you were aware of, Eden, going into the season? That you think, another reason why you didn't want Viola or Valeria or any of these girls sort of getting to the end? Because I feel like Australian Survivor is sort of tailored to young, athletic females when they play the game, especially when you get to the merge.
When you get to the merge, there is a lot of balance challenges. And I knew Valeria, like anyone that's a dancer background, that's got some sort of dancing that's fit, they're going to be threatening in all those balance challenges. And there's a lot of them. So I definitely knew that getting up to that point. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to actually target Valeria before Winner out there, because I think she just won that 60K Set for Life challenge. Like she had the ability to go pretty far on some of those challenges. So it was definitely in my head as well. And that the final challenge is basically an endurance challenge. So you need to prep your end game to know who do I want to stand next to in that final challenge to give me the best position moving forward. Because if you can sit next to someone in that challenge that maybe has really big feet or maybe doesn't have the best balance, you've got a way better chance of winning in that regard. The other thing with Riri, amazing. Like, honestly, like absolute beast mode out there. But there was a lot of holding rope challenges. Like there was the one on the ball where you're standing on the ball. Then there was the one where you had to have like hold your legs over and sort of their own version of last gasp where you duck in the water. Then there was the one where you had to hold with 2 hands. So there was a lot of that. And that doesn't play into my wheelhouse. I would have loved some more like puzzles and stuff like that. But they're those challenges with those ropes that anyone with some sort of good core energy, good balance stuff is going to do well. So yeah, it was definitely on my radar when I was out there.
Yeah. We've got a couple more comments here I want to read. Brendan saying maybe TNT should get rid of some super fans like Mucky and recruit some people with Instagram followers. Do you have anybody in mind, Brendan, when it comes to that? I feel like you already have someone in mind. Gabe says Australian Survivor casting has that sweet mix of fans and recruits. Mucky hitting back saying maybe if Brendan's memes were funny, he would actually get casted on the show. More beef here in the comment section.
When I was putting my application, I remember back in the day, that was a thing that I was trying to balance. It was like, do I make my application just super funny and just gag it up and do everything a joke in there? And then I got some good advice, which was, no, just show that you're witty. You don't necessarily have to have a gag because they do want to know these answers about you. They do want to know what is your like deepest fear or what is like, there is an aspect of it. Yeah, you can be a bit funny with some things, but if everything's a joke and they don't actually get to see any of the real you, that's when you can have sort of an issue. So I tried to balance that out, be witty and show that you're witty, but don't necessarily, you have to, every single answer has to be a joke or every single answer has to be a gag. And I found that finding that balance is really interesting in that whole casting process.
Tom, take notes, mate, before you hit the submit on the application. You see, I was that confident, Eden. I didn't know I was going to talk to the likes of yourself, Mark, and Aileen after the season. I just applied. Like, as soon as it went up, I'm like, I'm going to get the video. I'm going to do it. Applied it, put all my stuff in there. I didn't overthink it. Like, I'm a shoot from the hip kind of person.
And that's good because at the end of the day, they don't want things like, it should be like your video, for instance, it should be like a confessional. Like they want someone that can just talk. They don't want a highly edited chop and change sort of thing because that's not what you get on the island. You have to do confessionals and you talk and it's just naturally what comes out. So you want to keep that sort of element of it pretty loose. So I think that's a really good way to approach it. But the thing is that a lot of super fans fall into this category is, the super fandom is them. Getting on the show, they identify that as who they are. And you've got to think about, and this kept coming back to what I was doing. If you go in there and you say, for instance, I love hiking. I like go hiking with my wife, and it's something that we really love doing. You've got to think, you're probably up against a competitive like mountain climber, hiking trainer that has been doing it for 25 years. And it's the same thing with super fan. Like you can be like, I'm a really big fan. You could be up against someone that's named their first kid JLP and had an entire themed Survivor wedding and has a big Survivor tattoo on their back. Like you've got to understand that that's fine, but there's got to be other aspects to you. And I think that's when, like, I don't think it's a coincidence that it's not until like I got married and I like had a kid and these other experiences. And part of my story became about being a dad is really important to me now, and being married, committing to my wife. And I told the story about like at our wedding vows, we had a lot of Survivor references, like "You're my ride or die" and "My alliance" and all that sort of stuff. And
nice.
I'm not sure if you heard, I told a story on my other one of my other podcasts where Rachel told me she was pregnant via Survivor puzzle. So
that's cool.
I came home from work. She's like, "Oh, I know you had a hard day at work, but I've made this Survivor word like scramble that you can sort of sit down and do." And I did it, and I was putting it together, and it spelt out, "Are you ready to be a dad?" And then I turned around and she had the pregnancy test there. And so stuff like that is like really amazing.
Did you have that in the audition video?
I did have that. They did like that.
I could see why they casted you based on that story alone. Jeez.
But the other aspect of that is that is the sort of the sugar or the cream on top. You're also, what sort of person are you? And it always comes back to, you've got to exaggerate yourself to 11. You've got to these aspects of you that are the positive out there aspects. What is the best version of that? Okay, what is the best thing that you can bring to the table? And it's about putting that forward. And if you are if
You
you were
see, my
super passionate,
story on my video was I said, listen, I'm taking one for the team. I'm trying to get Mucky not to apply and get on the show because I know he's going to get humiliated and be voted out first. So, right, if you want to get a nullified take podcaster in there, just choose me instead because I'm trying to be a good mate. Okay. I've been podcasting with this guy for 2 years. He's got no survivor sense. He's uncoordinated, So that was like my whole identity is that I'm trying to be a good mate. I'm trying to save him. And I'm going out there with this bracelet that I've made for myself, which is what would Mucky do, when I'm out there, and I'll look at it daily and do the exact opposite.
yes.
And I reckon I will get to the end and win the game. So I don't know if they're going to be as invested in that story as I am, but if they choose Mucky and he goes home first, I can at least know I can sleep, soundly at night, knowing that I was trying to be a good friend.
Yeah,
Basically.
this is true. This is very true.
The other thing, I can see how that is like, having that story as an aspect. I think definitely, like you said, it's confessional, and it is quite hard for fans to know what to say because you've only got 3 minutes, and you've got to nut it down. You've got to put your whole life in 3 minutes, which is not easy to do.
No, and I think another good thing to have is, this is what I started to do, and this is really helpful. So you don't have to be. So being a good storyteller is really important. But to be a good storyteller, you have to be a good story collector, and you have to be. And this comes from, like, I do comedy. I write comedy with my brother. I'm doing a Melbourne International Comedy Show at the moment, and one of the biggest things to help with that process is you just write notes down, things that happen to you, little stories. You write them down because they disappear from your mind. Little funny little things or little things that happen with your mates. You start writing them down, and then you go back and you look over it and you're like, oh my god, yes, me and Mucky were out the other night and this happened. This is really funny, and you just go over that stuff, and it starts to help you articulate those things. And then when it comes to those situations, you start to be able to recall those things better. And then you've got these little stories, you've got these little quips, you've got these things that basically show, not telling. It's all about show, don't tell. You probably hear that a lot. It's about you can tell a story. You can say, oh, I'm really funny, or you can tell a story where you are funny. You know what I mean? Like where or you say something funny that, like, you've got to really show that. You can't just say, all my mates say I'm really funny. You go, no, I was out with my mates. This happened. I got it on the table. I did this, and then this person did this, and it was crazy. Like, that's how you sort of get that stuff across in a video in those regards. So I think that's really important. And start writing down those little stories. Like, I went back every time. I used to like before I had a kid, I would travel a lot. I love traveling overseas. Every year I would go on a huge traveling trip. I'm trying to knock off all the 7 wonders of the world. I've only got 2 left to go. I've just got to go to Petra and the Taj Mahal. And every time I go away, I just
Amazing Race next.
Oh, mate, I tell you, do you want another story?
Go. Sorry for interrupting your flow there, but I feel like Amazing Race would be perfect, right? Like you get to travel on Channel 10's budget.
So Amazing Race, me and Rachel, my wife, applied for the first season, came back. And again, we got all the way through to the very last round. So we played up the thing that we subverted the normal couple trope. I was the emotional, intellectual, puzzly one. And Rachel is the sporty, no, really competitive. No, let's crush them. So we sort of had the dichotomy of that. They really liked that. And we ended up getting to the point, they rang us and they said, you guys are like, get ready to go. Get your visa. We had to get our visas done for all the countries, but they couldn't tell you what countries you were going to. So all they could tell you is the size of the photo that you need for the application for the visa. So we went down to get our photos taken, and we're like, we need a photo this by this size, this by this. And they're like, what countries are these? And we're like, we don't know. They're like, what is going on? like we can't talk about it. So we did it. We put all our visas in, and then I Googled the sizes. So I figured out we're going to Mongolia, South Korea, China, all these places.
That's a great hack. ChatGPT. You got to go check it out.
So then I got down to like, get ready. And at the last stage, we got cut for an influencer couple that had like 100,000 followers on Instagram or whatever. And me and Rach didn't have a big following on anything like that. And so we just missed out. But a team we were mates with in our audition did get in. And we had a chat to them afterwards, and they said it was such a great experience. But that was the other show that we would really like to do. And to get so close and then to miss out, we were like, killer. But yeah, again, really funny.
Yeah, amazing. I do want to bring up this question by Hello, and it's one that I like to ask normally as well.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
obviously, is there anything? I know that most players say they wouldn't necessarily have changed anything if they were to play the game because it's the experience that they had. But if there, you know, is there something that you look back at now that you're like, if I was to get to go out and play again, this is a mistake I would avoid, maybe based on your first season?
Yeah, sure. No, it's a really good question. And look, honestly, you can go crazy with woulda, coulda, shoulda. You can go, oh, if only I talked to this person. Oh, if only I'd done that. And it's so circumstantial. It's really hard, and you try not to do that because there's so many different things, like sliding doors moments. It's ridiculous.
It's that whole thing. If you had to play the game 100 times, like I reckon that based on what I've picked up from your strategy, how you've played the game, the understanding the subtleties of the social game, I would put money on it that more often than not, you would get to the merge, you'd get pretty deep in the game, potentially even could go on to win the game. It's just you don't get 100 opportunities to play the game. It's unlike playing Monopoly against your friends every weekend, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, but there was a few things that I noticed over there. So one was, and this was tough to do, but we did not win like any rewards out there. Like we got basically nothing to eat. The rebels at the start were getting all the reward challenges. And even when we got to merge, that we just didn't, after with the swap, we just didn't really win any. And that really did start to hurt when you hadn't eaten and stuff like that. So I would definitely want to try and get some of those reward challenges and get some food into us, because by day 30, my brain, I hadn't eaten like anything, your brain slows down and you take longer. And I would be up all night going like, okay, running every scenario, like, okay, if this person has an idol, then we need to split it this way, then we need to do this. And it just took hours to like think through because your brain was slowing down. So that's something that I would be really aware of out there. The other one was, I did get into a habit of, this is where it's hard to explain. So sometimes if I didn't need someone to be in on a vote, I wouldn't include them because it was a wild card and we're not voting for them. They'll be okay. But that does start to impact people, and it does start to make people feel like, and so when you talk to them later, they're like, why didn't you include me? And you're like, oh, well, we weren't sure about where you were. And we weren't 100% on this, and we didn't need you, and we weren't targeting you, because I was sort of a believer in, I was telling people I'm not going after you, and I wasn't, but I was voting off people around them. And logically you're going, well, I'm not, like Alex and Ree, like I'm not actually targeting you. I don't want you guys to go home. But that does end up getting to people, and they do start to go, no. If you're not including me in this, then that's as good as voting me out. And so that does turn. And so I needed to keep track of that a bit better, I think. The other thing that I needed to do, and this is interesting, is I got to a point where I was worried if I was seen as someone that was making really good relationships with a lot of people and then burning them like straight away. So I was just really aware of, look, do I double down with Ray, and do I really like get in really well with Ray and then just to vote him off next and people be really annoyed at me? So there were some people that I was, you know what, I'm just going to step back from them a little bit and consolidate my strength. Whereas really I needed to be talking to everyone and trying to do it in a way that was subtle enough, because I really did think out there you were going to have a bit more time to have subtle conversations with people. But no, that scramble, man, the scramble is real. You get back from tribal, you get back from immunity, and you have a certain amount of time that you have to have all your conversations. And you see everyone walking off, you see everyone going off, and it's really hard. Like being a fan of the show, that was one thing that did surprise me. Being a fan, I thought you'd have a lot of time to just walk down and be like, hey, let's do this. It's really all happens in the scramble. Like and that Sarah vote, man, that Sarah vote was the best almost of any season. It was the best example of the insanity of that time just before Tribal Council that it was the best like visual representation of that experience. Just run. This is happening now. Mark's coming in. Forget about that plan. We're on this plan now. I've got an idol. Just vote Caroline. Let's do this. Ree's going, what the hell's happening? Like I'm running around going like, I think Mark's onto something. Alex is lying to us. I'm like, Alex, the girls have just blown this up. Sarah's come to me, told me this. Alex is like, no, they just figured it out. I'm like, I don't think they did, mate. I think you told them. No, I didn't. Like there was so much happening, and that was wild.
I love that. I think the second or third time Sarah came back to you, there's a moment where you see it on your face. You're like, fuck, I'm done with this. And you sort of just walk off, like you have nothing to say to her.
So, well, it's interesting with that, right? So what ended up happening there? So Sarah, the classic thing was Alex came down to the girls and said, like, they're actually splitting on you two. And then Sarah goes, "Oh, I'm just going to go and talk to Eden because Eden will let you know what's happening because I haven't heard that." And then Alex is like, "Mate, don't blow it up." She's like, "I'm not going to blow it up." And so she comes up to me, and we actually had quite a big conversation. And this is before Mark got there and everything like that. And she said to me, "I love Sarah. I think she's too sweet for this game. She's an absolute angel, and she's so lovely." But she came up and she's like, "Look, Eden, I've heard that you guys are splitting on me and Ree. I've heard that we're voting for Mark. I've heard that we're voting for Caroline. Everyone's told me these things, and they can't all be true." And I'm like, "Yeah, people are lying to you, Sarah." And she was just like,
What?
and then Kitty comes over, and then and she was just like, "So what's happening?" I'm like, "Look, we're sticking to Mark. We're voting Mark." And she's like, "Okay." And then Mark comes up, and then we obviously couldn't say to her that we're voting Mark because Mark was there. So that's when you see us all just be like, "Well, we're going to stop talking." And then I just disappeared. And then what was funny is then I go over to Alex because this happened. Like we saw Alex walk to the girls, and then we saw Sarah walk up to me. And so I just said to Alex, I'm like, "Hey, Alex, the girls figured out the plan that we're splitting on them." And he's like, "Oh." And Alex is just like, he knows he's caught red-handed, but he's just like, "Oh man, they must have just figured that out on their own." I was like, oh really? This is interesting. And so and it was funny. It was that point that I realized that we didn't have Alex, which means we didn't have Mark, which means we couldn't split the vote. But I didn't have enough time to go and tell everyone. So I had to do it at Tribal Council.
Yeah.
So we're at Tribal Council, but I known because we didn't have that, we couldn't split the votes. And so then I had to let Caroline, Kitty, and Jaden know, guys, we're not splitting, drop them all on Sarah. Because I did think, I had a suspicion that Mark had something. And I think I thought that he wasn't going to play it for Sarah or Ree or those other guys. He was probably going to play it for himself. And he did. And I, like, a lot of people were giving Ree like a lot of stick for that vote, right? Which I don't agree with, because if you look at it from Ree's point of view, Ree had voted with us the round before, right? And she'd voted Viola, and the girls had got her in on that. And she'd come to us and been like, what's happening? And we had told her we're voting for Mark. Like that was the plan that she thought was happening. And even though Mark tried to get her in on his plan, again, if you look at how that situation rolled out, Mark had told them vote for Kitty originally, like it's on Kitty. And then when it came out that we'd gone to Kitty because Ree came and told us, Mark came back and said, "Look, they figured out this. I've got an idol. Just vote Caroline now. This is what we're doing." If someone came up to me and just said, "I've got an idol. This is what we're doing. The plan before is all the change now. I would also be like, "Hang on, what is going on?" Like, no, I'm not just changing my plan, because Ree felt that she had agency in this game. She wasn't just going to go along. And how does that help her going into a 4-4 split and going to rocks for Sarah? Like, honestly, she goes, "I felt a connection with the girls. I want to get back to Kirby." Very similar to Jaden. Like, she wanted to get back to Kirby. If that means that she has to vote with the other side just to get through another round, then she knows that, well, then Alex is probably next after that, and then we can go Mark, and she can be safe for a couple more rounds. So
I think it was a little bit of that bias that happened as a fan, where at that stage, the middle-aged Mafia was seen as the group that was in control and that was running that tribe. So fans wanted the move more than, I think, blaming her for making a bad move, because she was a part of that underdog group with Mark and the rest. So I feel like there was like a bias fan reaction to wanting to see the underdog kind of upset the power structure that was in control of that tribe, I think, more than anything
but
else.
I don't blame her for doing that. At that point, I thought that and you know what's frustrating with that, and this is again just getting pretty deep into the game, but like Caroline and Kitty was the ones that built the relationship with Sarah and Ree, which was awesome. They were very good at that point in the game bringing those girls in. But what ended up happening was, so because Ree had that relationship with them, Ree was talking to them and saying like, "Oh, Mark has just done this, like blah, blah, blah. Mark's blowing up the game." And Kitty originally thought that she was lying. And then I'm talking to Kitty, and Kitty goes, "Oh no, Ree's just told me this, but she was lying about it. She's just trying to like sabotage us." And it's really hard for me as a player to ascertain whether someone is lying through someone else. So it's really hard for me to go, "Oh, Kitty, are you sure about that? Because that could be true." when you haven't talked to, because you're not picking up on social cues, you're not picking up on is someone looking nervous when they're talking to you, like those physical cues. You're not picking up on those non-verbal cues. So that's really hard. And because she kept going to Kitty, and then Kitty, for whatever reason, wasn't trusting her, wasn't sure about her, it means that Riri's like truthfulness didn't get through. And ironically, the one time that she did talk to me, the vote that I went out, where she's like, I'm going to go talk to Eden about it. And I talked to her and I said, look, the votes are actually going to be on you and Valeria. So yeah, play your idol and you'll be okay. And then Valeria will go home. And that was actually the plan. That was that original plan before I corralled everyone to try and get onto Ray. So I was telling her the truth at that point, which is so funny because all the other times that she'd gone to the girls hadn't believed her and been like, no, mate, this isn't happening. So it's funny how those relationships sort of form, and whether you've got relationships through other people or not, because you're really relying on that conduit point, which was something that I just found very interesting.
Yeah, I've got a question I want to ask about Ferris and, working with Ferris's alliance, Eileen and Ray for that one vote. Obviously, Kitty and Caroline had that. We saw more of them talking to Ferris than probably you directly talking to him.
Kitty and Caroline built that entire connection. That was all them. That was awesome because if you remember the vote before the Scotty quit. Yes. Kitty was actually going home. We found out later that Kitty was 100% going home that vote. And that was the impetus for those girls to be like, you know what, we've got to make something happen. And they went out there, they talked to everyone. And I remember talking to Mark, and it did feel like they were scrambling and they were talking to everyone. And there was a bit of like, okay, that's not a good look if you're going to every single person. But ultimately paid off because they got into Ferris's ear and they built that relationship with Ferris and Ray. And that's became that next voting block. So good on them for doing that. And then I got pulled into that. But in that situation, we had a big chat about who the target should be. And I was like, I think it should be Valeria. She's done this, and we were sort of all openly talking. But then Ferris and Ray were very much like, no, we want winner. Winner's got to be the target. And it was at that point that in this current group, I realized I didn't have enough agency to control or manipulate the vote into how I wanted it to be. And I had also picked up on the fact that Kirby and Ferris were not targeting each other. And all we had heard pre-merge was, it's a Ferris versus Kirby war, two sides of the dial. They were both fighting each other. When we got to merge and they didn't immediately, like if that was true, if this was actually happening, Ferris would have said to us, now's the time to get Kirby. This will be great. We'll get Kirby. Or Kirby would have come to us and said, we're going to get Ferris. The fact that they didn't come to us and say that told me, without telling me, that they were in a sort of a frenemy sort of situation and they wanted to keep each other in the game. So that gave me the ability to go, okay, well, if we're going to stick with this group, Ferris, Ray, Eileen, Alex, all these guys, then, and they're not going to turn on Kirby, which means Kirby's not going to turn on Riri, which means I've only got maybe two or three votes before I'm next. And that's really what I felt. I felt like they'd probably get rid of Valeria. Ferris had a good relationship with Mark because of the key thing.
Yes.
Again, they built an unspoken bond just because Mark did find the box, Ferris had the key, and they couldn't quite make it work, but they formed a relationship there. So I knew Mark was probably safe with that Ferris group. And then it became, it's Jaden. And then after Jaden, it's either Kitty, me, or Caroline. And probably because Caroline and Kitty had made more of a relationship, it was probably going to be me. So I could see that in 3 votes, I was probably going home. And that is why I made that move in that situation in the next one to try and corral everyone together and change the game up for me.
I don't blame you at all in that regard. I mean, Gabe's got a question here about how Kirby played the game when she went into the merge, sort of trying to play a bit more in the background in the first couple of days before striking. But obviously, Kirby's situation was very different to your situation, even going into the merge, where she probably felt like she had a little bit more game to play before people were going to look at her. What was you mentioned that Kirby and Ferris both were sort of seen as people that were going to go after each other. What was, I guess, Kirby's reputation going into the merge? Like, were you seeing her as a threat? Because the show definitely showed us that she is a threat very early on, but was that the perception of the players who were playing the game?
So not everyone, like Alex did that classic thing of like, Kirby's playing the best game, she's going to be the big target. I knew that Kirby was a big player. This is going back to the challenges. I knew she was looking at challenges really differently and in unique ways. And the perfect example of this was the challenge where you had the two idols tied to you, and you have to get off the other person's idol. And I noticed she did the classic move. And for someone that doesn't know Survivor, it was really impressive. She did the classic move of she sacrificed one of her idols just to run straight to the other ones and then pull that second one off. And she won like that. And that just showed me that she was able to think about these games and challenges in really unique ways. And from that point on, I was like, Kirby's a really, really smart player, and she's really physical, and she's got a lot going on. So in my mind, she was always a massive target. Honestly, I probably could have sat on the radar. No one was bringing up my name. I had good connections like across the board. Like I had some connections with Ree. Alex obviously was a little strained at that point because of how he didn't go home. But I was still in with the Caroline Kitty. Mark, I still had Mark. I still had all these sort of connections. So no one was really bringing up my name. And I probably could have sat on my hands for a couple more tribals and sort of got through.
You could have gotten Raymond's advantage, and it could have changed the whole game.
Well, I would have eaten the popcorn. That would have been my popcorn, mate. Being a cinema manager, that's my MO. I would have loved it. But there is part of the game that's like just survive long enough. But guys, I wanted to make.
I take it you're not a Sandra fan. You're not anybody but me strategy person.
I wanted to make good television. I wanted to do things.
Yeah.
Even if it was subtle behind the scenes, I wanted to try and do things. If it was bombastic, like in this last round, I was like, you know what? I feel like the shield mentality is in full force. And if people think I'm sliding under the radar too much, I could actually be one of the people that is seen as the second in command to a Mark or to a Caroline, and they go, oh no, don't get rid of Caroline now, don't get rid of Mark, let's get rid of an Eden or a Kitty. And so I was like, you know what, I've got to do something at this point to pop my head up. It's sort of like Gabler. You want to pop your head up, you want to make some big moves, and then you want to get back down and manipulate people from the background.
And have you spoken to the Gabler man himself? He's a big Australian Survivor fan, by the way.
I have not spoken to him, but I did I did really enjoy. Some of the other guys have, and they're like, he's actually a champ.
He's a really good guy. Yeah, we've had him on the podcast before.
Oh, really?
Well.
Oh, good.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
So I think in that regard, I could have probably done nothing and stayed around a bit longer. But I'm thinking longer term, and I'm seeing where the cards are falling.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that it's going to become very difficult for me moving forward because I didn't have that relationship with Ferris. Like Mark had the relationship with Ferris, the girls had a relationship with Ferris. He was a big player. And it's funny how all these connections happen because Valeria had a really strong connection with Kirby. So if you told Mark something, Mark would tell her, then she would tell Kirby, and then Kirby would tell Ferris. So it was really hard for me to maneuver anything at that point without it getting back to them. Again, this was not going to be good when we got to a point where I had to try and make a move. And you saw Ray got sort of painted in a position where it was like, it was hard for Ray to make a big move. Like he had to have this huge advantage, which was great. And he played it perfectly, which was awesome. But it was harder and harder for him to make a big move because everything was so like fluid and everyone was sort of doing their own thing. And a lot of that came down to sort of Ferris and Kirby. But yeah, look, I could have. Would it have been a winning strategy for me to not to do anything over here? Maybe not. But getting through a few more rounds, it could have been very advantageous for me to try and establish. And you know what would have been good for me, actually? Would have been if through whatever reason, a Caroline or a Kitty actually going home. Because I feel like once I went home, I feel like Caroline and Kitty's threat level definitely dropped because they stopped being seen as this big group. Same with Mark. I think if Mark still had all the Vs with him, I think Mark would have been seen as a much bigger threat. And so the fact that he did lose Viola actually lowered his threat level a bit. And then when Valeria left as well, Mark just became the floating man. And you saw Mark was one challenge away from winning the whole thing. So there is something about having those other people fall away and then being able to manage your threat level and then get through. And Mark did a really good job at that.
But again, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Like you've got to ask yourself the question, like if I was to go home, would I feel good about the game that I played? And did I try and win the game? Was I making the moves at that point that seemed right to me to get deeper in the end and win the game? And I feel like you followed your gut. It didn't work out in this case, but you know, those are the things that you said earlier in the podcast. It's hard because you can go down that rabbit hole and sort of stay down that rabbit hole for a long time, right?
Yeah. And you know what? What would have been worse is probably going through another 2 rounds, and then there being me secretly getting blindsided, and I have no idea, and I'm just sitting on my hands, being like, "Oh wow." So I just went home, and I didn't get to do anything. I didn't get to try at least and pull something off, and at least I went out trying to do something. And look, it didn't turn out, it didn't work. I would have loved to have been in the jury, because I feel like then I could have experienced the whole show. So that's the only thing. Maybe I should have waited. And another good rule is you always make moves on odd numbers. That's like a classic Survivor rule. You try and do the switches on odd numbers, and this was a 12, and it was too late that I realized. I was like, oh my God, I'm doing something on an even number. Oh no. Hence why I nearly went to rocks. But no, it's all good. It's all good.
I do have a question. So obviously you leave at this point. You don't get to go to the jury villa. In your mind, leaving the game, who was the person you thought front runner to win the game at this point, prior to leaving? And what was your reaction when you found out who actually did end up getting to the end, and ultimately who won the show?
Yeah. So when I left, they actually asked me, they said, who do you think is going to win? And I said, there are 3 people that I think can win at this point, and I think they are the people that can corral votes. I feel like the people left in the game, Kirby, Ferris, and Mark, they all have the ability to either forcefully or manipulatively get people to vote for who they want to go out. And that's not saying that people like Eileen and Ray couldn't have won the game and played an awesome game. I just felt at this point, people that could get people to vote with them had a much better opportunity to win. And so I did say to them, I said, no, there's only 3. It's only Mark, Kirby, and Ferris's game right now to win. And ultimately, they all
you earned the money.
Very close, yeah. And so I had quite a good read on where the social dynamics were at that point. When I heard how it turned, like when I saw and experienced how everything turned out, it wasn't surprised. I was surprised with that no one bothered to flush Ferris's idol for so long, because we all knew that he had it. And I really felt that at some point that should have been a bigger narrative of like, let's get rid of this idol now. It's too powerful. But again, it comes back to the point that if you've got Valeria is mates with Kirby, who's mates with Ree, who's mates with Ferris, who's mates with Ray, who's mates with Eileen, suddenly that's all these people that don't really want Ferris to flush their idol because they're sort of working through Ferris. So unless you turn around and you really sold it to Kirby, like, Kirby, Ferris has an advantage over you. You need to even the playing field, so you guys are both even by getting rid of his idol. So let's try and do something. And that would have been sort of a narrative to try and flush his idol. I was really surprised that didn't come up more as a bigger issue. I'm not surprised Ferris. I thought Ferris was very charismatic. I feel like he got people on board. I feel like he also had the ability, more so early in the game, but there was a feeling of like, oh, if you cross Ferris, he'd be really angry with you. And so people were less wanting to take those shots. But I was always of the thing, well, if you get rid of Ray, then who's Ferris got at that point? Eileen's going to jump ship, probably, if it's just Ferris left, and then you can go back and try and flush his idol there. So really, you destabilize someone. It doesn't matter if they're angry with you. It's going to be very hard for them to get like back into a position of power. But yeah, so Ferris, look, I think he's a great ambassador for our season and a great winner. And I think he's doing great stuff. So I'm really pleased with our winner and how Ferris put his game together, because he was doing a lot out there, and he played loyal game to Ray, like was really on top of him. I would have loved to have, this is going to sound really bad, I would have loved to have seen him have to vote out someone
close
that he, like, I know he voted out Kirby, but I think you always have to vote out Kirby because Kirby was going to beat you.
Yeah.
Whereas it would have been really interesting if it got to a point where it was like him, Eileen, Ray, like a Garrick and all this stuff. And then like, okay, well, who do you turn on then? And that's when it's really tough. That's when the game is really
like, for
tough.
me, I found it very satisfying seeing Kitty turn on Caroline and the rest of the Mafia. And I was like, the last person, she was like all about loyalty and this trustworthy woman. And then I was like, look at what Survivor's doing to you. You're turning against Caroline. I couldn't believe it. And it was so sweet. And it's interesting because obviously talking to Ferris after the season, he said he went in thinking he could betray and backstab anyone. And then when he actually played the game, it becomes harder and harder because you get closer to these people, and you're kind of relying on them. So he never had to do that. But I agree, definitely a great winner and definitely a great ambassador, I think, for the season, which has been one of the best seasons that we've seen in Australian Survivor. I've got a couple of quick fire questions I'm going to end you off on. So these ones here, you just throw out whatever comes to mind for you first. First one here: if you had to cast someone in your season as a Star Wars villain in the next movie, who would it be and why?
Honestly, Darth Raymond. Darth Raymond,
Raymond.
mate. I think Raymond would be such a good villain. I think he would be great. He'd be manipulating people. He'd be pretending to be weak and frail, but actually come out and attack you. Like, yeah, I think
Unlimited power.
Yeah. Okay, so if you had to cast someone as Titanic Kate Winslet's role for Titanic, who would it be from your cast?
Okay, this is great. I love it. Kate Winslet. Okay, I would actually go.
Is it Rose? I think her name was Rose in the movie, wasn't it?
Yeah, It's Jack and Rose.
Rose,
I'd actually go. I'd go Riri probably.
Riri. I didn't see that coming.
I think Riri, because Riri is very she's very personable, but she's a bit sore-watery. She's Kate Winslet's a bit standoffish at the start, and then she sort of finds herself. And I think as the game went on, I think Riri sort of really came into her own in that regard. I think she'd be good.
Okay, now you have to cast someone in your cast as the next Indiana Jones. Who would it be?
Oh, love it. This is a good one. I could see.
We'll go male or female on this one. You can go either way.
Oh yeah. Go either way. I actually think who'd be a good one. Who looks the part? Tobias.
I
Tobias
can see
looks the part. But you know what I'd love to see? I think Mark. I think Mark would be great. I think Mark's really smart. He's got the paleontologist vibe, I think.
Love it.
And he loves wearing a hat. He loves wearing a hat. So get him in the. I've got my official Indiana Jones hat here somewhere as well.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that. I love that.
You look at Tobias. Tobias is he's a wild child. He'd actually be really good.
100%. Okay. Survivor, do you like, I think we spoke about this a little bit earlier, but 26 days or 39 days?
No, 39 or every day of the week.
All right. This one's going to be tough, but I'm going to have to make you choose Jeff Probst or JLP.
Oh, mate, you're killing me. Okay, I'm going to say something controversial. I love Jeff Probst because he's original.
Yeah.
JLP now, I think he's the gold standard. He's doing so well. I think if you go pre-Probst being executive producer, I think that's strong Probst.
I reckon so as well.
I think JLP at the moment is he's awesome. He's awesome out there. His banter's great, and he's doing a really good job. So now,
so far, you and Aileen have got exactly the same answers. So let's see how far we can go with this. Next one here: if you had to choose the king of Australian Survivor, is it George or is it David Gannat?
Oh well, you know what? I love George, and I think George is the best. But if you're going to be the king, you've got to win. You've got to win. Yeah. Like, love it. He hasn't won yet, and I think George is awesome, and he's changed the game in a lot of ways, but he still hasn't. He's fallen at that last hurdle, and David he played a magnificent game, and he ended up winning. And yeah, look, some people say that back end of All Stars was a bit of a steamroll, and no one was really looking to get rid of him. But I still think he won at the end of the day, and he was a very, very, very good winner. So until George wins, I think he needs to win.
George is up there. I think we all agree. Definitely mad respect.
Of course.
Mad respect. But I agree with you, definitely for me as well. Next one, you might go down the same sort of road, but Queen Hayley or Queen Shonee?
I know people are gonna hate me, but yeah, I'm a Hayley supporter. I think Hayley really understands the game. I think Shonee is great at making social connections with people. I just don't think she has the strategic chops that Hayley does. I don't think she understands the game at a level that Hayley does. And
she's one of us, Hayley, super fan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I can see that in her style and how she approaches the game. Whereas Shonee's realized that, okay, a big part of this game is social connections, and she's great at that. And she can talk to people, and she makes people feel really welcome. But I think you need another layer of that. And the perfect example is last season where she let George get the better of her. And that was just.
I agree. Yeah, two good answers there. So next one here: Exile Island or Classic Survivor?
Oh, So X, are you talking? Yeah. Okay. So the last couple. I liked. This is going to again be controversial. The Winners at War concept with Exile. I think there's a version of that works because I love those characters. I thought the boot order was not the most desirable one in Winners at War, which we can all agree with. My boy Ethan got done bad, and
still hurts.
Oh my god,
Yeah, both of them hurt.
Oh, dude, I know. I think what you do, I think the best scenario is you play it like that until merge, and you give one person an opportunity to get back in at merge, and then you kill it, and it goes back to regular Survivor. I think that's the best version of that. But ultimately, I prefer classic Survivor without it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I'm a classic Survivor person as well. I'm not a big fan of Exile Island, but I guess if they had the longer 90-minute episodes, maybe, because I felt like they were focusing too much on Exile Island instead of what was happening in the main game, which I wanted to know more of on that season. But totally with you on that one.
I think with that as well, someone coming back into Final Six, it's just not the game. It's not game. It's not Survivor. I'm sorry. It's you coming back in too late. It's ridiculous.
I agree. Well, just the fact that you had 2 Exile Island seasons and both times the person who came back at the final 6 ended up going to the final tribal council. It shows you it's overpowered. Who's your favorite winner of all time? Any franchise?
Oh, favorite winner of all time. I love. Oh man, this is really tough.
It's hard because there's been so many seasons, right? But if you had a gun to your head and you had to choose one, you know.
Oh, okay. I really. It's just winners. It's really hard. You know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say someone that's really well-rounded. I'm going to say Jeremy. I think Jeremy Collins is really well-rounded. I think he's a lovely guy. He's a family man. He's a firefighter. He's really strategic and he's really gets on with people. I think he's that good, perfect mix. Look, maybe not the most entertaining winner, but that's a different question. I think he's probably one of the strongest all-round winners out. They did really well. But man, dude, for entertainment value, Tony. It's got like
definitely. He's entertainment value. Tony, 2-time winner. Still can't believe we live in that world. To me, it's just insanity.
Tony is talk about kings. Tony is the king. Yeah.
The next one is your favorite player. So this could be anyone from any franchise.
Again, I have to go back to Jonathan Penner and Rob C, two people that I've absolutely loved watching over the years. I think they're both really good narrators, and that's something that's a big part of the season for me.
Now, if you were to go back on a season and the twist of the season was it's called Destiny's Tied. So you're tied to this person, their fate in the game. If they go home, you go home. Which person are you calling from your cast to go back with you? Like, who would you not mind being tied to in a returnee season?
Oh, that's a good one.
Jaden.
I think. Imagine that.
Well, this time, hopefully, he can't backstab you unless he wants to take himself.
I don't know. He may. He would. He's like, hang on, we're both going home. No, I think it would have to be Mark. I think me and Mark had a really good understanding of the game, and I think we both came at it. I would have loved to us both to have come back at the end and battled it out. So I would actually love to be like with Mark. You know what's funny? Before I went out like a couple of years ago, I played this guy that I knew put on a real life Survivor like over a long weekend for like 4 days. And one of the twists they had was you got put into pairs with someone for one challenge. And if you won the challenge, you were both immune. But then that tribal council, if one of you got voted out, your partner also got voted out as well. And they did a similar thing like that. It's a great little twist. It's wild.
It's amazing.
But yeah,
Have you seen Survivor South Africa at all?
South Africa. I've seen some of the South African ones. Yeah. But not.
So Immunity Islands, the season called Immunity Island, they had tied Destinies as a twist in that season as well for a round in an actual Survivor franchise. So, but they were not the first one ever to do it. The first Survivor franchise to do it, and my understanding is that it was Survivor France who did it before anybody else. So that's where it gets a little bit difficult because obviously it's hard to follow some of those seasons. It's if you don't understand the language, you know. But I've got a fan who listens to the podcast who's from France who actually at the time told me actually this is from Survivor. I think it's called Colata or something like that. It's called something different, but it's Survivor over in France, and that twist happened there first, I believe, before Survivor South Africa took it. Obviously, Leroux Botha, who's the executive producer for Survivor South Africa, is a big fan of the franchise and also keeps an eye on all the other franchises. So sometimes brings some of these things into the game. Yeah,
love it.
Yeah, amazing. Well, the last thing I wanted to ask, and I always like asking players this is, what would you, you had a notebook, which is great because it means you've written down all these different moments while you were out there, so you can always look back at that and sort of remember the time that you were on the island. But let's say you don't get to play the game again and you've only played it this one time. Do you have a boy or a girl?
Felix, little boy Felix.
Little boy. 10 years from now, 12 years from now, when you talk to Felix about your experience, what's going to be your fondest memory of the game? It could be something that we saw in the game, maybe something that didn't happen on the show.
I think one thing for me was there was a couple of nights where I think one of the first nights where I was in this crappy shelter. It was one of the worst. The Titan shelter was one of the worst shelters ever made. And it was like pouring down with rain. I was sitting there in a ball, huddled up. And it just really hit me. I was just like, I am playing Survivor. Like, this is a dream 23 years in the making. And I'm literally here, like soaking wet, cold in the middle of the night playing Survivor. And I couldn't be more excited to do it. And I would just have this overwhelming feeling of like, this is amazing. The other one was the tug of war where me and Charles were losing and we managed to like inch it back like a little by a little over like what was 45 minutes. And we got it back and we won. And then I was just like, are you not entertained? And it was so like, it was such a cathartic moment. Hey, it's Marky Mark. And it was, that was such an amazing moment for me and Charles to win that. And for someone that's not physical, like that's not my thing. So to win something like that was really sort of out of my bag. And that was really fun as well.
Yeah. Listen, Eden, we had so much fun talking to you tonight. I mean, this is the longest that we've actually gone in any of the interviews, and we thank you for the time. No, we really thank you that you were willing to, share as much as you did about your experience out there. And we're very grateful that you jumped on the podcast. You're going to be welcome anytime you want to jump on the podcast. Reach out to me if you just feel like, hey, I want to talk about Survivor US this season. Clearly, you've got some great insights. We'd be happy to have you on if you wanted to do it. And if, Rachel was kind enough to share you with us again for a podcast in the future, we'd be very happy to have you on board. But, do you have anything currently going on that you would like people to check out? Anything you want to plug on the podcast?
Well, if there's any, if there is any Melbourne listeners out there, I am doing the Melbourne International Comedy Festival with my brother. Game Boys Comedy is our group, and we've got a show, Escape to the Megaverse. We open next Thursday on the 11th. We play for 2 weeks. It's at 9:00. Come on down. It's really fun. It's a mix of like 90s nostalgia and pop culture references and AI. We do a big thing about what if AI took over a comedy festival show and stuff like that. So it's really sort of fun sketch like comedy. So come on down and check us out. I think you guys will really enjoy it.
So straight after this live, Eden, please send me through a link to that so I can also put it into the description of this video, and I'll make sure to post it everywhere where we can on our socials. I should definitely, as someone that's in Melbourne, come around and come check it out. So I will definitely, I'll definitely come check it out. An excuse to go out. I love comedy and stand up as well, so it'll be a good night out. But for anybody else that have sort of been in the live tonight, that have taken part in the conversation and have asked questions, we thank you. It's been great. It's been a great season. We should have some more guests hopefully from this season coming on to talk to us about the season as well, so stay tuned for that. More will be revealed soon. We may even have somebody very chaotic and who we wanted to return from the pre-merge coming onto the podcast. I think it's going to be an absolute delight when we talk to this person. Tom, you're back with me on that one. I'm getting you back into the chat
as long as it's not Caroline.
No, we've got to get Caroline. We've got to get you to meet Caroline, because I reckon that will be a lot of fun as well. But no, listen, if you all have checked this out and if you enjoyed the content so far, please consider subscribing. It helps us grow the channel and gain credibility where we can bring more and more people onto the channel. Hit the like button, put the notification bell on. But for now, grab your torches, head back to camp. We'll catch you guys next time.